everyone. So most of us have had some kind of a trauma, whether we were when we were kids or growing up. And then how do we get rid of that? All these traumas, they get into our nervous system and they don't go away. Well, Rachel is working and infusing yoga therapy with her clinical social work to help her clients overcome trauma. Thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us, and namaste.
Thank you so much for having me be here with you.
Well, talk to us how you're using these two beautiful modalities and helping your clients who have gone through trauma.
Of course, yeah. So I've been a psychotherapist for a long time, and I've worked with trauma in many different settings. And I think sometimes when we try to talk our way out of things, we miss what is most impacted by trauma, which is our body and our nervous system. So I think yoga therapy has been just such a wonderful tool to use with my clients to really help them to find balance in their nervous system again and give them tools that they know that they can take and do something. Because I think a lot of the time psychotherapy doesn't necessarily give people real tangible tools that can help to regulate their emotions on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, so let's just take an example of when you're infusing psychotherapy and yoga therapy. So how would it look like? Like would be sort of like a counseling with the trauma client? Let's take an example of one of your clients. And what would yoga therapy entail? Is it a combination of chanting, the mudras, the breath work, and what type of yoga? Could you just elaborate a little bit on this?
Sure. And I think it looks different with every client. And I think this is why I love yoga therapy so much, is that you can really use it to be what exactly that person needs and where they're at, and take all the tools and really make it a personalized practice for them. So a lot of the times what I'll do in the beginning of my work with my clients is to do a full intake, see what they're working on, and then really try to create a practice that works for them. So some of my clients, we might sit down and put together a practice that is 15 minutes that they can do every morning. And that is including asana and pranayama, meditation. And we often mudra as well, and some chanting. But then sometimes my clients aren't necessarily in the place to do a practice for 15 minutes every day. Maybe that's the goal long term. But then we also work to find small practices that they can do throughout the day to help find balance. So I often work with clients who are also healthcare professionals or therapists as well. So giving them tools to just manage their emotions and regulate their nervous system throughout the day, even if it's a 5-minute practice or even a 2-minute practice, just things that they can integrate to help bring themselves back into balance throughout the day as well.
So what would be a simple sequence entail? Like talk to us about type of postures and different type of breathing and chanting, whatever. How would that, like a 5-minute or 10-minute, whatever you like?
Yeah, I mean, I think for all of my clients, the most important thing is a lot of times what happens with trauma is that we dissociate from our body. So a lot of the work is helping them to reconnect to their body and build the awareness back into what's happening with their body. So pretty much any practice I'm doing with someone, we're going to start with just simple body awareness. And that can be a mountain pose, that can be in a seated meditation pose. And depending on where they're at in their practice, if they've never practiced yoga before, it might even just be starting as something as simple as belly breathing. So using a 4-count inhale, 8-count exhale, which is a really good way for us to help bring the parasympathetic part of our nervous system on. And then for postures, it really depends. If my client is presenting as really depressed, we might do some chest opening and back bending to help to give them more energy. If they're feeling just overwhelmed and anxious and emotionally saturated all the time, then we're going to do practices that maybe are a little more movement focused, more dynamic, to help release some of that energy in order to then at the end of any sequences, like finding a little time for relaxation, and then some type of meditation. And one thing I always try to do with my clients is really give time in the beginning to check in where they're at when they start and where they're at when they end, to really just see what practices are working. So it's a constant recalibration of what's working for them, and then how we can be changing that over time based on their needs and what's changing for them.
Okay, and then let's just talk a little bit about how often and the duration. You talked about 2 minutes, 5 minutes, but someone who has gone through trauma would need a sort of like a continuous process, right? So what does that entail? How many months are we talking about? How many counseling sessions? Just so that people who are going through trauma, they understand what is in store for them.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And I think it really depends on how much you've experienced and how big of an impact this had on you. So a lot of my clients experienced ongoing trauma throughout their childhood. So they're really working through a lot of trauma that is layered on itself. Because usually if we experience trauma growing up within our family of origin, we then become adults and kind of repeat those patterns. And we usually experience more trauma as adults as well. So I think there's ways that you're going to feel better in a couple months. You might find like more stability, you're feeling a little better, but the long-term work, I think, of really undoing some of these deeper patterns and finding balance that's going to last could be, a year, a couple years. Some people, like to go to ongoing therapy if that is something that they really feel like is valuable for them.
So, okay, yeah, I think, most of us who have experienced some kind of a trauma, we need to do some kind of a regimen, right, on a daily basis, so that it doesn't appear, like it doesn't get triggered, I should say that, right? So anything else you'd like to add? This is a quick 10-minute session that we bring hope more than anything else, that using holistic lifestyle can help you lead a better, healthy, and joyful, bring joy and happiness to your life. So we're not selling happiness here or joy, but we are advocating that to bring joy to you. So anything else you'd like to add, Rachel, before I wrap up?
Yeah, just to go off that, I think what is my favorite thing about yoga therapy and yoga in general is it's really to help us tap into what we already have within us. So when we have practices and we're able to integrate that into our lives, it's really so we don't have to rely on other people, because we all have the tools we need within us. And then there's all these guidance from outside of us that we're really just tapping in to what's already there.
Absolutely. So the moral of the story for this particular session is infusing, psychotherapy with yoga therapy and the postures and breathing, and combining all that together and get the trauma out of your head, and basically doing a continuous process. It's a continuous process. So with that, thank you so much for everyone for helping us, support us on a daily basis. Hope these sessions are useful to you, and we just bring these quick 10 minutes every day. Namaste, and thank you so much, Rachel, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, bye-bye.